As a matter of fact, being in the U.S. makes it somewhat more challenging to be to anonymous because we have the NSA who has their fingers into every transaction. So all you NSA people out there who are watching this video, we know what you're doing. And so that was episode 1. That's an important lesson. And Elliot says, whoever controls the final hop on the network controls the traffic.
The onion routing protocol, it's not as anonymous as you think it is. Whoever's in control of the exit nodes is also in control of the traffic, which makes me the one in control.
And that's the same thing that the NSA knows, is that they know whoever controls the final hop controls the network. From my experience of dealing with all of these young people, that's like their ultimate goal.
Yep.
Is to be able to hack their neighbor's Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah.
That's why they all want those Wi-Fi. They want to get the Wi-Fi of the neighbors, and they think also that maybe I should throw this in here is that they think that if they use the neighbor's IP address, that they're safe.
So joking aside, because obviously we don't recommend that, would using your neighbor's Wi-Fi actually keep you safe?
A lot of people believe that if they use their neighbor's Wi-Fi, that they're going to be safe because the IP address is going to show that the neighbor was on that website. Many years ago, I was working with an investigator for, I think it was with the Navy at the time. He was what they call the Naval Criminal Investigation Unit. And he and I were talking, and he said to me, that doesn't work. And I said, why not? He says, because whenever there's a crime committed, and it's clear that the people whose home Wi-Fi did not commit the crime, the first thing we do is we start knocking on the doors of everybody within a few houses. And 100% of the time is what he said. I'm not saying this. He said 100% of the time, we will find the person who committed the crime within a few houses. All right.
Oh.
So he says, I said 100% of the time? He goes, yes, 100% of the time. Even though it's possible to be able to pick up Wi-Fi in some circumstances with special Yagi antennas and what have you, you can pick up Wi-Fi for a little or two, right? But hackers, because they're people who think that they can get away with a crime by using their neighbors, they almost always get caught because they are using the next door neighbors or the person 2 or 3 houses down. And then law enforcement just has to go knocking on doors and asking questions. I was surprised when he told me that. He said 100% of the time. And so since that, this is over 10 years ago, I've kind of checked the cases, and he's right. 100% of the time, the person is right next door or right behind the house or in the same apartment building.
Hey everyone, it's David Bombal back with Occupy the Web. It's been too long since our last interview. So glad to have him back. Occupy the Web, welcome.
Thanks, David. It's always good to be back on the best IT cybersecurity channel on YouTube.
That's very kind of you to say that. If you don't know who Occupy the Web is, have a look at our previous videos, which I've linked below. He's also the author of this book, Linux Basics for Hackers. Fantastic book if you want to learn Linux from a hacker's point of view. He's also recently published this book, Network Basics for Hackers. What I love about his books is he takes subjects like networking, Wi-Fi, whichever subject you're interested in, like Linux, and he teaches it from a hacker's point of view. He's also got this book, Getting Started Becoming a Master Hacker. Really great to have you back, Occupy the Web. What are we talking about today? Because this is a really good topic, I think.
Well, today's topic is how to remain anonymous on the internet. This is a subject matter that is near and dear to my heart.
I've just got to interrupt you before, because I want to say this. For everyone who asks, because I get this a lot, I don't know who Occupy the Web actually is, because you're anonymous to me as well. I don't know your name. I don't know where you live. I kind of believe that you live in the US, but I know almost nothing about you. So you've done a really good job of being anonymous. So I think you're the right person to talk about this.
Thanks. Yeah, I am in the US. So you can tell my American accent that
Yeah.
I'm in the US. As a matter of fact, being in the US makes it somewhat more challenging to be to anonymous because we have the NSA who has their fingers into every transaction, every packet that traverses the internet through the U.S. They don't necessarily have that around the world. They try to have that around the world, but they definitely have it in the U.S. So all you NSA people out there who are watching this video, we know what you're doing, and we know that you're looking at every packet, and they know exactly who everybody is. And the NSA folks, they have made it really clear to me that they know who I am. They have actually, they sent me messages saying, we know who you are. And they do that on purpose because the NSA, they kind of see the internet as their territory and they want to know everybody who's in their territory. So trying to stay anonymous from the NSA is really, really hard if you're in the U.S. It's not as hard in your other countries, but in the U.S. it's really hard because they basically have taps into all the pipelines of all the traffic in the U.S. and they capture every packet and can examine it. If they want to know who you are, and they can find out. So, but if you're in other countries, it's a little bit easier to stay anonymous from the NSA and the other intelligence agencies. But it's really hard to stay anonymous from your own country's intelligence agencies because all of them have taps into the local internet. So let's say this right up front. Okay, that is really hard to stay anonymous from your own country's intelligence agencies. I also want to point out that if you become a target from these intelligence agencies, it's really, really hard to remain anonymous because they have tools that make it really, really difficult to stay anonymous. David, you and I are going to do a show on Pegasus.
Yeah.
Pegasus is this notorious cell phone hacking software put out by NSO, the Israeli hacking group. And with Pegasus, they can basically just target your phone and take over your phone. And then, of course, you're not anonymous. Every message that you send on your phone, all your geolocation services, every message you send becomes captured by the intelligence agency. So that's a whole different bailiwick of trying to remain anonymous from those guys because they have capabilities and they have legal sanction to do things that nobody else does.
You're talking offline, there's different levels, right? So you got like the commercial companies, is that right? And then it like the NSA is like right at the extreme.
NSA is the extreme in the United States because literally they're given access to all the pipes and they can see all the traffic and they can trace it. But they don't have that access in other countries. Some countries they do, but in the U.S., they've been given total access to all the pipes. And so they collect all of the data. They have this big data farm where they put all the data in there and they can basically trace just about. They can trace anybody and they get metadata off all of the packets and all the traffic. If you become a target, then they can do even more and get more information about you.
So, I mean, some people might be disappointed by what you said because it's like, how do I stay invisible? How do I stay, anonymous? Can I stay anonymous from Google? Can I stay anonymous from anyone? Or as soon as I go on the internet, am I going to be discovered?
Well, if you're trying to stay anonymous from the commercial interest, that's relatively easy. We can talk about that. The other thing that I find with a lot of people is that they believe that the only way to trace them is through their IP address. So there's this fixation on being able to hide their IP address. There's other ways of tracing your identity other than your IP address. So if all you're focused on is hiding your IP address, you're going to be exposed by both the commercial interests and the law enforcement and intelligence agencies. So you have to think about all of the different ways that somebody can trace you. And that's why one of the things that I emphasize is that if you want to remain anonymous and safe, you need to understand forensics. You need to understand OSN. So if you understand both of those fields and you understand then what people can do to find you and find your information, then the better off you are in being able to hide your identity and your traffic.
But are you saying that that VPNs are like all these VPN adverts are wrong? If I get a VPN, I'm safe.
Well, let's start off by saying one, okay, that you're only as safe as the VPN is safe, right? So the VPN is going to hide your IP address, right? And that's my point I was trying to make earlier, is that there's obsession with the IP address. But
the whole business has been built on this, a whole industry. So I'm just being sarcastic, yeah.
And we're going to blow it apart, right?
Yeah.
Because yes, it's a good measure. VPNs are a good measure. Proxies are good measures. Tor are good measures. But there are ways of tracing you other than just the IP. All of those, okay, are going to hide your IP address, but there's other ways of tracing you other than just your IP address. One of the things you have to keep in mind in trying to remain anonymous is that you can only put up, you can put up hurdles, all right, but it's almost impossible if an intelligence agency wants to find you that they do. If law enforcement is going to try to find you, they have resources, but they have to expend a lot of resources. If you're good, they have to spend a lot of resources to find you. Now, in general, most people who are navigating the internet are not thinking about anonymity. And basically, they're giving away all of their information about their entire life to commercial interests like Facebook or Google and others. I'm not comfortable with that. Maybe you are, but
no.
Yeah. And so one of the things you have to keep in mind is that if you're using Chrome, which is a great browser, by the way, Google makes a really good browser, and I really love Chrome, but it's constantly sending back all your personal information back to Google headquarters. If you ever using Chrome, open up, say, Wireshark while you're using Chrome. And what you'll see when you're using Wireshark is that Chrome is constantly communicating back to Google headquarters everything that you're doing. They're constantly sending back information on you. So when you get an ad, you go, gosh, that's amazing. I was just thinking about buying that. How did that pop up on my screen? Well, that's no mystery, because they not only are they sending back information about you, but remember, we're living in the era of artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is not only looking at what you're searching for, but they're trying to create a mind map of you. So what they're doing is that they're saying the person who is doing these types of searches is likely the next thing they're going to want is this, because that's the pattern that we understand from looking at billions of people in the world, that with these characteristics, they're going to want this. And they can actually anticipate your needs and send you an ad for it. So if you want to stay anonymous from those people, that's a little bit easier to do. One of the things is, first off, just don't use Google Chrome, because Google Chrome is owned by Google, right? And it's communicating. Bing is communicating to Microsoft. Even Mozilla is communicating back. Mozilla's a little safer than the others, but still, they're communicating back what you're searching for on the web. There's a relatively new browser called Brave, right? I
use it, yeah.
Yeah, you use it. I use it. That is more anonymous than the others. So that's one of my first recommendations: is get away from using Chrome and Bing. And
when you say Bing, you mean one of their new browsers, right? Edge, right? Edge.
I'm sorry. Bing.
Yeah, no worries.
Bing, the search engine. Yeah, Bing is their search engine. Edges. So yeah, those products are designed to capture information about you. And then once somebody captures information about you, it's pretty easy for them to be able to determine who you are. There's other things that can also be captured. Like, for instance, there's whenever you visit a website, you're presenting these cookies that are in your browser, right? So if there's any cookies in your browser, they are going to appear, and that cookie has identifying information. At least if it's a cookie that has been placed there by Google or Facebook, okay, and both those companies put cookies in your browser, then it's going to identify who you are. All right. So one of the things you can do with your browser is go to the settings and turn off no cookies. Now that's going to make your life a little bit less convenient, because that means you're going to have to log into every website, and nobody's going to know who you are when you go in. You log into your Facebook account, they're not going to automatically know who you are and log you in, or other services. So it makes life a little more difficult, but it's going to save your identity.
So you would recommend using private browser windows, stuff like that, right?
Private browser windows and just turning off the no cookies, okay, on any browser that you're using. It's going to come in different places. It's usually going to be in settings, security, and you can go ahead and click on no cookies. Cookies are a lot of information. For those of you who aren't familiar with cookie is basically a text file that has information about who you are and what your interests are. It may actually include things like your username and password. This is as you traverse the internet, these cookies can be presented to other people, other websites. So people are focused on IP addresses, but remember, for somebody to identify you by IP address, they actually would have to get into the ISP or the VPN to get their records, their log files to identify you. IP addresses are something to be concerned about, but these other issues are equally important in terms of trying to maintain your anonymity on the internet. One of the things that I'd like to show you here, let's go into Kali and talking about IP addresses. One of the things that is available to us in Kali and other places is what's called proxy chains. So proxy chains is a tool that uses multiple, you can use a single proxy or multiple proxies, okay, to be able to hide your IP address. So let's go just hiding your IP address. We're going ahead, let's open up a terminal let's open up a new one here. There's a tool in Kali that allows you to use proxies. It's called proxy chains. So you can just go proxy chains. It's built into Kali and others, not just Kali, but others, Parrot and Arch Linux and a number of others have proxy chains built into it as well. The key to using proxy chains is simply to set up the configuration file. In Linux, every configuration file is simply a text file. All you have to do is go into the text file to be able to edit it. So let's go and look at the proxy chains configuration file. Let's see, I'm going to use a mousepad, which is built into Kali. It's a GUI based versus Vim. And we're going to go, is that Etsy proxy? If I remember, where is that? Proxychains.conf? Nope, it's not there. We'll close this. Yeah, okay. Let's go to CD Etsy, and we'll go to Etsy is where most of the configuration files are in Linux. And you go up to, you'll see up here, proxy chains 4. That's what I had wrong. It's 4. So we're going to go up arrow here. Let me clear my screen. All right. So then we're going to go mousepad, proxy chains 4, and then look at that. All right. All right. Here we go. This is the configuration file for proxy chains. What proxy chains will do is it'll allow you to select proxies that will then take your traffic and move it through a proxy, hiding your IP, and you can even send it through multiple proxies. As you can see here, there's all of this up here is basically comments describing what they do. The option below identifies how proxy list is treated. You can have a dynamic chain where each connection will be done via chain proxies, a strict chain, okay, which is what I have commented, so we'll just use a strict chain initially. There's a round robin chain. Each connection will be done via chain proxies. At the chain length, which is a variable, you can set the chain length. There's a random chain. Each connection will be done via a random proxy. All right. Here's a chain length. By default, is set to 3. And then if we scroll down a little further, we'll see there's a number of other variables here. Here's the proxy list format. It's going to look like this: SOCKS5 and then the port number. And if there's a username and password, okay, HTTP, these are all local IP addresses. So those aren't ones that you want to use. All right. What I've done, and usually it's set by default within Kali in this proxy chains, is using the SOCKS5 and then using 127.0.0.1, your local host, on 9050. This is Tor. As you know, Tor is the special, separate network of routers, okay, that encrypts your traffic from hop to hop to hop. Tor was originally developed by the U.S. Navy so that they could go ahead and navigate anonymously. It's now an open source project. We do know that there are some issues with Tor where it's not totally anonymous. Institutions and intelligence agencies like the NSA can still crack Tor, but it's still pretty effective for what we want to do here. So let's go ahead and try it out just using Tor as our proxy chains. You can go ahead, once you set those major settings, go ahead and save and then close it. And now what you need to do is to go ahead and start Tor. All right, so you can go sudo system control start Tor or enable Tor. So Tor should be running now on your system. Then let's go to proxy chains. You can't use sudo because Mozilla doesn't like it. And then just go Mozilla. And now what this says is it runs proxy chains and then runs Mozilla. Firefox, I guess it's actually Firefox. Mozilla is the name of the project. Firefox is what it is. And there we go.
So what you've done now is you've started Firefox, a browser, but going through Tor network, right?
Right. I'm running my Mozilla Firefox through the Tor network. You can see it in the background here. Let's kind of see if we can get both of those online here. All right, you can see it's running through a strict chain. It tells us right here, strict chain, which means that it's going to go through all of the proxies that you've listed. In our case here, we've only listed one. We've listed the Tor network. And then let's go to Hackers Arise.
I hear it's a good website.
I hear it is too. Yeah, lots of good information there.
That's right.
All right. So you can see that it's going through, and it's anonymizing my traffic coming through the Tor network. So we could use both. There is a separate a Tor browser, or we can use the Mozilla built in to Kali and just send it through the Tor network. Let's check our IP on this. Okay, let's go. What's my IP?
Yeah, you live in Amsterdam now, right?
Amsterdam. Okay, Amsterdam is where it's at. That's my location. Let's go and refresh again. Let's see if we can get a different Tor router. And this one's still the same IP.
Yeah, you're still in Amsterdam.
Sometimes you can go ahead and just refresh it and it'll jump to another IP. Let's see if we can get another IP out of it. But you can see how slow it is. This is one of the drawbacks to using Tor. Some of the commercial proxies will run a lot faster. I think I've told the story before that when I was doing some work in Washington, D.C., I was doing a training of the FBI at a few years back. And I thought it'd be funny that when everybody was out at lunch that I was going to go ahead and this is when the Silk Road was still up and running. I said, I had the Silk Road up on the screen as they walked in from lunch, and it had all the drugs for sale.
Ooh.
So they came back from lunch, and I had the Silk Road up on the screen. You can tell this has been a while because the Silk Road's been down for a while. But of course, there's other sites now that do the same thing on the dark web. And I said, okay, you guys, what are you going to do about this? And they said, that's not our problem. That's drug enforcement's. And interestingly, if you know the story, that it actually was the FBI then who took down the Silk Road, even though their response to me was, no, that's not our job. That's drug enforcement.
And didn't you say something along the lines that it was actually very fast because it looked like you were using one of their local nodes or something?
Exactly. So I did tell the story here before. Yeah. So I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'm like, gosh, it's so much faster in Washington, D.C. And that was before I knew that the NSA had nodes all around the Washington, D.C., so that it was running just as fast as my regular internet would in D.C., because they've got nodes distributed all over D.C. to make sure that they can see all the traffic. Interestingly, if you've watched the Mr. Robot series, in the very first episode, Elliot is able to... he goes into a coffee shop. It's like Dan's coffee shop or something like that. And it turns out that Dan is actually running a server from his coffee shop. And Elliot discovers this and confronts him with this information. And he's like, how do you know that? How can you? He said, well, because your internet is so fast that I always come here to use your internet. And then I began to wonder, why is it so fast? And so he put up a node on Tor network and was able to see the traffic going to his server, and then got into the server and saw that it was all. So that was episode 1. And that's an important lesson. And Elliot says, whoever controls the final hop on the network controls the traffic.
The onion routing protocol, it's not as anonymous as you think it is. Whoever's in control of the exit nodes is also in control of the traffic, which makes me the one in control.
And that's the same thing that the NSA knows, is that they know whoever controls the final hop controls the network. So he did the same thing. It's easy. You can set up a router on the Tor network easy enough. You just go to the website and they have the software you can download and put yourself as a router on the Tor network.
So this is the problem. You're telling us about Tor, but we could be still compromised, right? Because the NSA could have like exit nodes.
Exactly. Whoever has that last exit node controls the traffic. I'm gonna go refresh it one more time and see if it's still sending me back to Amsterdam consistently. I'm gonna go. Let's stop it and try connecting again. And let's see if we can't get a different IP address. There we go. And let's go, what is my IP? See, it's coming out with socket errors or timeouts whenever I go there. Let's go to Google again, right here. Let's go to what's my IP and see if we get a different IP this time. Here we go, detecting. Should get a different IP. Just give me the IPv6, but not the IPv4. Yeah, yet at least. Well, this would actually be best, right? If it's the IPv4 is not detected, but it does have the IPv6 and it's still working on it, and it still comes back with not detected. So you could make the case that that's even better. That's not detecting it, but I think it's basically the website is the problem, and not not that the IP address is not known. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. I'm going to go ahead and shut down our proxy chains. One of the other things that I wanted to show is that there's actually a tool called AnonSurf that you can install on your Kali that will automatically send all your traffic, okay, through Tor. So let's go there. Okay, we've got it installed now. All right, so now we've got a directory called Kali AnonSurf. Let's just take a look and see where it's at. All right, here's Kali AnonSurf right here. Let's go into that directory. Okay, let's take a look inside there. There's the installer, and then we got to run sudo installer sh. Gives me errors while processing. Let's see if we can get it to run. Okay, go sudo AnonSurf start. There it is. We're running AnonSurf. Okay, you can see it. It's killing dangerous applications, cleaning some dangerous cache elements, stopping IPv6, starting anonymous mode, saving IP tables rules, modified to resolve.conf to use Tor and private internet access DNS. All traffic goes redirected through Tor, and you're under an AnonSurf tunnel. So now what happens is that everything you do on this operating system is going to go through the Tor network. It's going to be a little bit slower, but it's going to give you better anonymity than it would otherwise. So your IP address is going to be hidden, except from the person who has the exit node on the Tor network. And hopefully that's not the NSA or the law enforcement. So a couple of the things that we want to talk about. We talked about using, a browser like Brave, okay, that's not collecting allowing cookies on your browser. One of the things that people often ask me about is what's the safest operating system? And there's a number of them that are out there that, all of them pretty much are using the Tor network to make you more secure. I found that using Kali, using the AnonSurf, actually works pretty good, pushing everything through the Tor network. The other issue that people often ask me about is, how about using a phone? Isn't a phone a major vulnerability in trying to
Android,
remain
yeah.
anonymous? Whether it be Android or Apple, because both of them can be hacked by Pegasus, right? And so one of the things about your phone is that you probably don't want to use your actual phone whenever you're doing anything that where you want to remain anonymous, because the data that's collected from your phone is all available to law enforcement. They can trace your geolocation. They can see your messages. One of the things that I recommend is to go out and buy a burner phone. A burner phone is simply a phone. It can be a cheap phone. If you go into some of the phone stores, you can buy these phones that are inexpensive. I think I've bought some of them as little as $20, $30, and put them on a pay-as-you-go contract where you pay cash for them. And then that's really, really difficult to trace. Right? There's no way to connect that phone to your identity. And so then you can go ahead and make your calls, send your messages from that phone. One of the things you want to keep in mind, though, is that when you go to buy that phone, that you're not traveling with your other phone in your pocket, because you can be then traced to the purchase of that phone, okay? Because every one of your steps is being followed. Whenever you're traveling with your phone, there's always geolocation that's available because your phone is connecting to the cell phone towers. And from the cell phone towers, they get your location. Now, it's not as precise as GPS, but it's still, they can tell if you're going into a store to buy the phone, they can trace you that close. So don't take your phone with you, all right? Go buy your burner phone. Use your burner phone for anything you want to remain anonymous. Do not do any of the same things on your usual phone, your normal phone, as you would do on your burner phone. Do not go to the same websites. Don't go use the same browsers. And so that's kind of the rules of thumb for using a burner phone. Ultimately, if you really want to remain anonymous, I recommend using 2 separate systems. This is, if you can afford it, this is probably the best way to go. Of course, you could have 2 separate internet services, all right? Or if you can hack your neighbor's Wi-Fi, you can use their internet service.
I'm not recommending that you do that, but someone
I would never recommend that. I would never recommend that. No. And then you could use somebody else's IP address, maybe, but keeping your activities separate in 2 separate systems is going to be one of the safest things that you can do, because you're using a different browser, you're using a different operating system, you're using a different IP address, so they can't be connected back to you. One of the things I also do is that I create false profiles. I put false information out on the internet so that information doesn't lead back to me. People try to connect that information to me, but it really is false information that's going to be, there's breadcrumbs out there that somebody's going to follow, and it's going to take them to the wrong place. And if they follow all the breadcrumbs, it's going to take them to separate identities. This is the kind of work that you need to do to truly remain anonymous. Because there's an awful lot of information that's out there about you from OSINT sources, from your cookies, from your IP address. And to really remain anonymous, it's like a full-time job. You have to think about everything that you do on the internet and whether or not it's going to leave a trace back to you.
Is it safe for me to use an ISP, or are there certain ISPs that you recommend? I think Starlink was one that we've kind of mentioned in the past.
Well, I use Starlink, and I use Starlink primarily because their IP addresses are not geolocated. Right. So if you go and somebody looks at your IP address, all it's going to do is it's going to take them to a regional office of Starlink. So I find Starlink to just create one more level of anonymity into your traffic on the internet. All it's going to do is going to say, hey, it's a Starlink IP address. Now, if Starlink wants to give up your identity, then that's a different thing. Or if Starlink gets hacked, then your identity can be resolved from that. But most ISPs distribute IP addresses by location. So somebody can find out what city you're in, not with 100% accuracy, but pretty close to it. What city you're in simply by your IP address, knowing there is these databases of IP addresses and cities. So I would say to create one more level of anonymity, I like Starlink, and then run Starlink, say, through proxies or VPNs or Tor.
So a great thing about Starlink is you can often buy this mobile solution, can't you? So you could drive around and, doesn't matter where you are. You could take it with you, and then you could access the internet from different physical locations. But I like what you said there, because if I use internet at my house as an example, and it's a fiber link or something like that, I mean, it's tied directly to my house. It's very easy to find me, right? But with Starlink, I could be anywhere.
Starlink allows you to be mobile. They charge an extra $25 a month to give you mobile. And so the satellite dish can move around. It automatically, unlike some of the old satellite technology where you were fixed on a single satellite, in Starlink they have thousands of satellites, and the dish is smart enough to find the closest satellite. So as you're moving, it goes and finds the closest satellite to you. Makes it much harder to be able to geolocate you when you're using Starlink.
So I mean, that's at least like, I'm trying to think in layers. Okay, so how do I get to the internet? I could use Starlink. I could, for instance, go to McDonald's or somewhere else and get onto the internet that way. But then I've got to or sit in a cold train station or somewhere, get onto the internet somehow. But at least with Starlink, I've got something with me that I can take around.
Yes. Yeah, you can, you can put it in your vehicle. You can, if you're traveling, you can take it with you, and it will automatically connect. And there's no geolocation that's assigned to it. Although you have to pay for with a credit card, so your name is still linked to that IP address. If somebody gets inside of Starlink, or Starlink gives up your information. Now, Starlink is an American company, as we all know, owned by Elon Musk. If Elon Musk wants to give up the information about you, then you're still not anonymous.
But at least it's one layer.
It's one layer. And that's what you think about. You're right. You got to think about layers. Right? This is one layer that makes it just a little bit more difficult to identify you.
Next one, and this is always a question people have, do I use a Windows computer? Do I use Apple? Do I use Linux? Or, Apple, Windows seem to both have a lot of data that they pull from you, telemetry data that they pull from you. A lot of people don't trust them, so perhaps Linux is the best?
Well, I obviously would recommend Linux. One of the things that both Apple and Microsoft do is that they put in user IDs, a GUID, into documents. And so that if you're creating a document and you're distributing that document, it can be traced right back to your computer. One of the things I recommend is do not use Microsoft Word or the whole suite of Microsoft products because they'll pull the globally unique ID off the machine and put it into the document. This is where forensics becomes really critical. So, if you're a forensic investigator, you know that there's a globally unique ID on that Word document. So if you're trying to trace somebody, you can pull that globally unique ID. It's not going to have geolocation data in it, but once your machine is identified, they can say that this document came from this machine.
Is it safe enough to use a virtual machine, or should I have a dedicated physical machine that runs Linux?
Physical machine creates one more layer. If you're going to run multiple machines, I would recommend one machine that you're doing stuff that you don't want to be traced on, and one machine that you're doing everything else from, if you can afford that. If you can't afford that, I would say run a Linux machine in a virtual machine, such as VirtualBox or VMware Workstation.
It's all about cost versus what you're really trying to accomplish, right? So, I mean, if you really want to go hardcore, you got to spend the money to do something like that, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to really make sure that you're not going to be traced, you want to go and spend a little bit of money, possibly have two systems. One of them that you're only doing the work. You're going to have a separate identity for each machine, right? And you can create separate identities and not have them be connected in any way, shape, or form.
So we mentioned Starlink. So as an example, I could have an internet connection at home. That's my normal internet, let's say fiber or whatever. And then I have a Starlink, which I do all my anonymous stuff on, and then I
Right.
have like a Linux machine that I use for my anonymous stuff, and then perhaps whatever operating system I like for my normal stuff. What about
Exactly.
phones? Because like they all seem to be, choose the worst type. It's like, is it iOS, is it Android, or do I have to go and use Graphene or something like that?
That's a good question. Basically, the most important thing I think is simply have a phone that isn't linked to any carrier, right? To any carrier and any credit card. Because once you've linked a credit card, you pay for it by credit card or have a service through any one of the major carriers, then you can be traced. These burner phones that you can buy for cash, you can pay for them with cash, the service for cash, month to month, the service with cash. That's really the only way to make certain that you're going to remain anonymous. And like I said, they should not be in the same location, right, at the same time. Right? If they're in the same location at the same time, one of them has to be turned off, because once they're in the same location, then they can be tied together to your location and your identity.
So in other words, Graphene by itself wouldn't be enough. You'd want to buy a burner phone with cache or something, because it's not the operating system that's the problem. It's the fact that it can be traced to you, right?
Exactly. I agree. What I feel safest with is simply using a burner phone, right? That's what I feel confident that can't be traced.
And what about VPN versus Tor? There's always the argument on YouTube and on the internet, and that's why it's great to get your opinion, because you're well experienced in this. Should I use a VPN like XYZ VPN, or should I use Tor, or should I use Tor over a VPN? Or, what would you recommend?
It all depends upon how much protection that you want. VPN for the average individual who's trying to protect themselves from commercial services, VPN generally are going to be pretty good. But remember that you're putting your life maybe into the hands of the VPN developer. They have all of your information. If they get hacked, right, and they do get hacked, then all of your information is available. So that's a trust that you have to place in them. So for the average user, a VPN is going to be fine. If you're working in cyber warfare, where your life is dependent upon remaining anonymous, that may not be adequate. In that case, in a cyber warfare environment where your life is dependent upon remaining anonymous, I would prefer either proxies or the Tor network. Proxies can pose an additional problem, once again, that they can be hacked as well. I would never trust a free proxy, all right? Because why would somebody put up a free proxy? Why would somebody put out a proxy?
Because it's the NSA.
What's that?
It's because it's the NSA.
Because the NSA, exactly. Or it's a GRU or whoever. So remember that the NSA, the GRU, all the intelligence agencies, one of the things that they want to know is everybody's identity. They know that people use proxies. So their job is to figure out who you are and what you're doing. If you were them and your job was to find that out, wouldn't you put up free proxies? Here, connect to our free proxy. And of course, we keep no logs. And of course, that's what they advertise. And that way, they can at least get some of the traffic going through their proxies. It doesn't make any money. So they have no business model there's no legitimate business model to keep you safe. If somebody's putting up a free proxy, there's no legitimate business interest to keeping you safe. As a matter of fact, there's an interest in keeping you unsafe, in selling your data. So I recommend, if you're going to use a proxy, use a commercial proxy where you're paying somebody to keep you safe.
So let's take it to the extreme. I mean, let's say your life depends on it. You're a journalist or someone who's involved in cyber warfare, something like that. You really want to keep yourself safe. So if I understand correctly, you're going to have two infrastructures, one for like normal and then one for anonymous stuff. So Starlink or whatever it is, separate infrastructure, separate laptops, separate phones, burner phones. You're going to buy that with cash if you can. You're going to use proxy chains, or you're going to use Tor or something like that. Is that right? Anything else that I've missed?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I just want to make sure that when you're using those two separate systems, that they do not intersect. The sites that you visit, the things that you do, the information that you provide do not intersect, because that intersection can be detected by people who are trying to determine your identity.
Do I need separate homes or separate locations? Like you said, the phone. I mean, I'm just trying to think. Like you said, don't put the two phones together, right? So I'm going to have to put that in.
Don't put two phones together on. Okay. I mean, you could put
Okay.
one of them in a Faraday cage, okay, just so that the location doesn't show, the geolocation services don't show them being in the same location. Because once you've revealed that, so for instance, if you have an Apple phone and you've got a burner phone and they're both sitting in your office and they're both on, right? They're both showing that they're in the same location. You've suddenly given away your identity as the person who owns the iPhone, right? That burner phone has now been linked to that iPhone.
So you put the burner phone in a Faraday cage, or you leave it somewhere else and you don't bring it to your home where you do your normal stuff.
Or you just turn it off.
What I really appreciate about Occupy the Web for everyone who's watching is it's not sensationalist nonsense. He's giving you the, really good information. So Occupy the Web, thanks for doing that.
Of course, anytime, David.
So Occupy the Web, another one we didn't touch on is email. Do you have any email providers that you could recommend for secure email? Because email seems to be one of those things it's easy to find people.
Yes, email can easily be traced. And so one of the things that I like, and those people who have worked with me and been my students or in some way associated know that I use Proton Mail. Proton Mail is the only one that I feel comfortable with. They are based out of Switzerland. It's end-to-end encryption. You might ask yourself, well, what difference does it make that they're in Switzerland? Well, the Swiss have particular laws that protect people's privacy more than even the EU does, or certainly the US does, because the US doesn't really have any good privacy laws at all. Switzerland has long had a history. That's why there are these Swiss bank accounts, right? Because the Swiss have special laws of protecting people's privacy. Even if you have end-to-end encryption, in a service, then if the servers get compromised or law enforcement shows up, that's often what happens. Law enforcement shows up and says, we think that we need to have the data from your servers. That's less likely to happen in Switzerland than it is in other countries. It's happened in the US, it's happened in Germany, it's happened in Australia, where law enforcement shows up and wants the records. Canada, where law enforcement shows up, we want the records, and therefore that all of your email and all of your communication is then compromised. Switzerland has laws that protect privacy that's more strict than other nations do. And Proton Mail, I've been using them for, I actually got one of the beta accounts at Proton Mail when they first opened up. You had to actually ask for an account, and you had to wait like 3 or 4 months to get an account. So I've been with them a long time, and I have a lot of confidence that they're going to do as good a job as possible to protect my information. There's a number of others that are out there as well, including MailFence, Private Mail, AnonAddy, Guerrilla Mail, Secure Mail, what have you. Those are all out there as well. As far as secure operating systems, some of the hardened operating systems include Qubes, Subgraph, hardened BSD are all good choices. You want a hardened and safe and secure operating system. One of the things I do want to mention before we finish here, and that is that a lot of people believe that making transactions in Bitcoin is untraceable, and that's not true. All right. As a matter of fact, I have a class coming up, I think it's in December, on how to trace Bitcoin. If you're trying to remain anonymous and you're using Bitcoin, Bitcoin is traceable. It's not easy to trace, but it can be traced. So it's not going to maintain your anonymity. But also remember that maintaining anonymity is a matter of throwing up a lot of roadblocks to the people trying to trace you. So the more roadblocks that you can put up, then the harder it is to trace you. But Bitcoin, a lot of people believe that they can simply purchase things with Bitcoin and be safe. Now, some of the other cryptocurrencies have better anonymity than Bitcoin does. So, and that's one of the things that I think we're going to talk about in the future.
That'd be great. I could do a video on that. So, and everyone who's watching, please.
One other thing we want to talk about is anti-forensics. I have a class coming up this summer on anti-forensics. First of all, I recommend if you want to remain anonymous that you study forensics and OSINT. But after you've studied it, then you have to focus on how can I keep the information off my machine. This includes cleaning off any files off your system. As we know that if you delete a file on your system, it still is there. So you have to overwrite files on your system. And then, of course, you want to clean your bash history or wherever you're entering your commands.
What would you say to people who say that the only way to do operating systems is to run it in RAM? So you boot off a USB or something, and it's all in RAM. And then when you finish, you pull that out and it's all gone.
Well, I think that's a really good idea. That's certainly an option, is to simply run your operating system all in RAM, say off a flash drive. And then once you've taken the flash drive off, everything is gone. I mean, it is still possible. Well, if you reboot the system, everything is gone, and nearly everything's gone from RAM. Okay, there's still, forensic investigators can still pull some information from RAM even after you've rebooted the system. Remember also that operating systems, when the RAM is full, it begins to write to the hard drive, right? There's swap files. So the strategy is a good one, but it's not 100%. That's my point. Right? None of these strategies is 100%, but if you put up enough of these anonymity strategies, the safer you're going to be.
We spoke about like buying a separate laptop or something for running Linux on, but you could perhaps boot into RAM on that laptop if you just want to, you go to the next level. So it's just like layers and layers and layers of
right.
Anonymity, right?
Yeah, the more layers you put in, okay, the safer you are. My thing that I emphasize to nearly everybody is that if somebody with enough skills and enough knowledge and enough resources wants to find you, they can. But that's key. Enough resources, enough time, and enough skills, they can find you. But most people don't have unlimited resources, unlimited time, and unlimited skills. What you want to do is to make it as difficult as possible. But if you really need to remain anonymous from, say, the intelligence agencies, that's a really, really difficult job. If you want to remain anonymous from the commercial interests or your next door neighbor, that's a little bit easier to do than it is from the intelligence agencies. They have a huge amount of resources and high level of skill.
Occupy the Web, another one that comes up a lot, search engines. Google's tracking you like crazy. What about DuckDuckGo? Some people say bad things about them. Do you have any favorite search engines?
What I would prefer, okay, is to use DuckDuckGo in Brave, all right, the Brave browser. Google is probably the worst in terms of tracking your information. So the Google Chrome is a great browser. I love Google Chrome, but they track everything that you're doing. So I would recommend using DuckDuckGo in Brave to remain safest, to have least amount of information. But once again, remember that even then you want to be able to have two separate identities so that what you're searching for in DuckDuckGo is different than what you're searching for in Google or other places. So the two cannot be connected.
I love what you said here, because in this interview, you kind of like putting emphasis on have different identities, like have everything separated. A lot of people, I think, make the mistake that they use the same devices or go to the same websites when they're trying to be anonymous and when they're just normally surfing. And I'm glad that you've really highlighted that. So a technical solution isn't the answer to everything. It's like make sure that you separate your behavior, if you like.
Exactly. And also, one of the things that I do is put out false information.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I leave behind false information that will take people to other identities, so that when they're trying to trace me, all of them are not leading to the same identity. They're leading to multiple identities, and that can at least obscure and make it more difficult to find you.
Occupy the Web, as always, I really want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience with all of us. You know, you've got many, many years of experience, and you are anonymous online, even though you write books, you share so much information. So thanks for sharing your warnings and your tips with all of us. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, David. I always enjoy being on your show and look forward to doing more of these with you in the future.
So just for everyone who's watching, ideas that we've got, let us know in the comments. Ideas would include Pegasus, talking about that. What other ones do we think about? Was Bitcoin, right? How to trace Bitcoin?
Forensics, yeah.
What about like Wi-Fi hacking? That would be a good one. Bluetooth, I think, is another good one. And we definitely want to have Mr. Robot, right?
And we'll do more with Mr. Robot as well.